Okay, so in this tutorial, I'm going to follow up on what I was discussing in the prior video about drawing complex forms in terms of identifying major and minor forms. Now, in this tutorial, I am going to give some tips on how you can shade complex forms from the perspective of thinking about major and minor forms, or dominant and subordinate forms. So you're thinking about the forms that are larger and underlying, the larger underlying masses, and how do you shade something keeping that in mind. So in other words, the underlying dominant mass should always be the one that determines the light and shadow pattern, okay? But overall, you can easily get lost or tricked by what you're seeing on the surface, because you may not see, like, okay, that there's a consistent light pattern following all the forms. Okay. Now, what do I mean by that? Let's show you a simple example. Let's use a block first. A block is very simple. So let's use a block. So you have a say we have a block like so. All right. Now we have a light source coming from this direction. Okay, so obviously this is going to be the lighter side because it's most directly facing the light source. Then this one would be second. So let's leave this the color of the paper to say it is direct light. This is in direct light, so it's lightest. Okay, this is in the middle, is gray. It's getting some light, but not as much as this is. And this side is definitely not getting much light at all because it's facing away from the light source. Okay, now let's say we have some smaller masses. Let's say we have some smaller forms like this. Okay, let's say we have another one like this. All right, and there's another one like this. So these are smaller blocks. Now, if they're receiving the same light here as this is, right, then the similar value pattern is going to be found on these. Okay. There you go. And of course, right here is going to be gray, gray, and gray. See? So what I'm illustrating here is that there's a consistent value pattern on all of these forms based on the same, receiving the same light from the same light source. Okay? They're being illuminated from the same light source. Okay, same direction, everything. So the value patterns are pretty much the same because they are block forms, right? Good. Now, let's say we had a form that looks something like this. So what I'm going to show now is an example of a form that combines all of these. And this can be something that relates to the head, right? Or any other form that you draw, okay? So let's say we have something like that. See? So basically, I've just attached these forms to this. Now, what do I mean in terms of having, you know, the value pattern follow the dominant form? Now, the first thing is when you're drawing something, you always try to feel for what's the larger underlying mass. What's the larger underlying mass? Okay, and let's just say we have this in the same light here. So this is in gray, this one is in deep shadow because this is facing away from the light source, like so. Okay, now we have these smaller forms. How are we going to treat these forms or deal with these forms? Well, they have to conform to the overall value pattern, and the overall value pattern is this. So in other words, whatever is happening up here, this larger mass is going to dominate that. So up here is in light. You can leave that the way it is, but I'm going to say, okay, there's shadow here. So there's a consistency that we're seeing. See that? This is also going to be in shadow. Now, see what I did here though? Do you notice that here we're having light and light? Now we're going to leave these light because we know that this is what's going on. Individually, no. We're going to make sure that they confide to the overall mass. So that means this would be in shadow as well. See? Because it's confiding, it's conforming to what's going on the larger mass. So it's the same thing with the head. If you're having, you know, you're drawing the nose should be consistent with the overall value pattern of the entire head. See what I mean? Up top here, see, notice I didn't make this too dark. I just made it a gray, and this is a gray. Because, yes, this side is facing away, but it won't be as dark as this, because overall it's getting a lot of light on the top, being on the top of the form. So it won't be as dark as this. So in other words, I'm thinking about what's going on in the larger mass when I do these smaller forms. Okay, and this is a very simple example, but it's illustrating a very important point, that light and shadow, the value pattern, should always be consistent with what's going on or be dictated by the larger underlying mass. So for example, if I were going to say tighten up or, you know, emphasize the contours here, see, I'm making this really bold, see? I would do that. Similarly with this. However, I won't make this too strong because it's on the middle value side of the form. Similarly with up here, I wouldn't make it this too deep. I'd make this outline be very light, and it will conform to the lighter contour of the light side. Okay, so there's a consistency that goes on with the smaller forms. Now let's say we have something else. Let's say we have a cylinder. We have a cylinder like so, right? So if we had a similar light source, again, we're going to have shadow, right? And then it's going to get lighter as it goes around to where the light is. It gets really light, okay? And here maybe a little gray, but here's where this area will be the direct light area because this part is facing the light source directly. So there'll be a streak of light. Now this is the general value pattern of a cylinder. Let's say we have some ovoid forms here, and they're also in the same light. See, they gradually get lighter. Shadow, gradually get lighter. See, we have a couple here. We have a small one. Same value pattern. Pretty consistent. Right? So now, let's say we have these smaller forms and this larger underlying form. So this is the major mass, minor masses. Major mass, minor masses. And this is what you see. This is what you see, this is what you envision or visualize or think about. This is revealing the thinking process and how you would approach something like this. Okay? So now let's say we're combining these together. And it looks, let's say we have a cylinder like that. This is the form you're drawing, right? And let's say we have something like that. All right. See what's going on here? So now, let's say this is what I see and I'm drawing. However, I'm thinking about it like this. See, so I'm ignoring all these smaller surface forms and I'm thinking about the larger underlying mass. So I am going to shade this just like a cylinder, just like this. Then it gets lighter as it goes around to the light. Same thing with this. See? Now, so what I'm showing is that even before I pay attention to the surface forms, I'm already laying in the underlying value pattern that follows the larger underlying mass, the dominant mass, the major mass, okay? This is the major mass. Minor masses, dominant, subordinate. Okay, so now I'm making sure that now I can shade these smaller forms to conform to the larger underlying mass. See, that's what's going on here. These are following the larger dominant mass. Now as I get here, these are being shaded in a lighter way. Why? Because I am following what's going on underneath. See, I may even make this completely shadowed. See that? I'm just going to open this to emphasize the whole light and shadow. If light is coming from this side, then this is going to be in light and this is going to be in shadow because this is facing away. See, when you think about things like this, it makes shading really easy, okay? Because you're thinking about direction and orientation of the surface. Where is the surface facing? And see here, I handle it really lightly. So even the contour down here would be really bold, and it gets lighter as it goes up here. Really bold and lighter as it goes up to here. See that? So that's what I did. I just notice here I don't even shade in some of the areas, because in light areas, to create the illusion of strong light, you have to leave things bleached out. Details cannot be seen, just like when you observe things. When you observe things that are receiving a lot of light, they don't reveal details that easily, because the light is so brightly lit. That area is so brightly lit, the details are bleached out. So when you want to create the illusion of areas that are in bright light, like here, the direct light area, you leave some of the details, you just leave them out. And that will reinforce the idea that, okay, this is in shadow. Similarly here, when areas are in shadow, some of it will appear obscure. See, like you can't make out what's going on. See? So this is thinking about combining. So the point I'm making here is, the big idea, again, is that you're focusing on the larger underlying mass, the cylinder. This is the major mass here, this cylinder. And everything else conforms to this. These are just additions into this. Okay? This comes first. Shadow, light, gray area. See, that's how I'm thinking. All right? Now, let's see, let's make an example over here. I'm just going to draw, I think in the last tutorial I did a leg. I'm going to do a leg again, and then I'll show you. Maybe I'll do a leg here and an arm or whatever, but just to show you the same idea of how you focus on the larger, simpler, larger underlying mass, the major mass, and then the superficial, the surface forms follow the value pattern of the larger underlying mass. Okay, so see, this is an example of what I mean. See how intricate this looks with all these surface forms and whatnot? But I am at first basing all my shading on this basic feeling here. Everything for this arm right here is based on this. So everything turns here. See, it goes like this, goes like this. See that? That's the overall value pattern. Under here is on the shadow, and up here is in light. See, and that's the same thing. Under here is in shadow, it follows this. See that? This is facing away in shadow, this is facing up towards the light. Okay, and that is what I'm following. So even though I am drawing these little surface forms you know, all these little muscles and all that stuff, that is secondary to the larger dominant mass. See, and that's how you have to think as well. You know, base your shading on the underlying larger mass and not on the little itty bitty details and stuff going on. So eventually I would darken, you know, these contours, especially under the shadow side, under here, to emphasize that down here is in shadow. See, I deal with here lighter, and this is in shadow. Same thing over here. Here's really deep, and this is really light. See, I don't even try to carve out the details up here. I leave it pretty light. And I don't need to go in there and mess with that, because that's just how we perceive. This is based on how we perceive things. And I think that pretty much drives the idea home that I'm trying to communicate to you guys, that you focus on the major underlying mass, the simple mass underneath, and everything else is just embellishing. All is just superficial. It's just details, okay? That follows secondary. That is secondary. That follows after. Do the first thing, which is focusing on the bigger, dominant, simple underlying mass, and then lay on top the little details. You know, I could even break these forms up smaller if I chose to, but it is enough to illustrate the idea. So hopefully you guys got some points from this, and you know, remember that this is a part of the series. So if you may have caught this video and not seen the ones I did before, I would suggest that you follow the whole series of drawing the complex forms from, you know, combining simple forms to what we have right now, and it will really, you know, enhance your understanding of the drawing process. Okay, not just literally doing what you're seeing, but thinking about how to see things. All right.